Hello and welcome to the Discovering Sligo podcast. In this series, we're going to discover lots about the past and present of Sligo, from geology to archaeology, history, heritage, folklore, fishing, music, and more. Join me and my guests and my dog Lucky as we discover what Sligo has to offer. So, hello and welcome to the next episode of the Discovering Sligo podcast. In this episode, we're back in the Millcote Road studio again, and I'm delighted to be joined by PJ O'Neill. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sally.
PJ is one of very few people in County Sligo to be able to say that they own a castle in Sligo. And I first met PJ through the IT in Sligo and through the Stones and Bones Society lectures. But subsequently, PJ, in conjunction with the college, let us, the students, loose on Moygara Castle for our training excavation in 2013, just over 10 years ago now. We spent 2 scorching weeks excavating a couple of trial slots inside and outside of the castle, and I even managed to get sunburnt. I still hold a slight grudge that one of my classmates lost a clay pipe stem that I had found, but I was delighted to return again in 2014 as a volunteer, and I visited in the subsequent years that training excavations took place as well. Moygara is truly a hidden gem in Sligo, and the work PJ, his sister Catherine, conservation and archaeological specialists, along with the very important community volunteers, is just phenomenal. So PJ, I'd love to know a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what inspired your passion for heritage, archaeology and conservation here in Sligo.
Thank you, Sally. Well, firstly, I was lucky enough to grow up in Moygara, the townland, which is about 3 miles southeast of Gurteen in County Sligo. And one of my first memories is being told of Moygara Castle, which was on our land. It was my playground as a child. And then curiosity, of course, got the better of me. And my father was a great man for telling me about the history of the castle as he knew it at the time. And he was very proud to be the custodian of the castle. And back in the 70s and into the 80s, there was a lot of visitors that would come and inquire, and he turned into a kind of a unofficial tour guide of the place. Now, if you came and decided to go climbing the walls, it was a different Frank O'Neill that you met. But no, I always was fascinated with the building. It was an incredible structure to have as your playground. But I was always interested in knowing more about it. We knew that the O'Garas had been the main chieftains in the area, that part of South Sligo. Lochgara was named after them as well. But other than that, there was mention of a Fergal O'Gara that we knew was probably the one of the chieftains in it. And then a lady from Galway arrived in the early 80s by the name of Maura O'Gara O'Riordan. And Maura was, from her name, a member of the O'Gara clan. And she came to our house and visited my father regularly and would talk the history of the castle and wanted to know about it. And that sowed a little seed in me about further interest in the building, who had built it and when it was built. And myself and Maura became good friends. And Maura then in 1992 decided that she was going to get the first study of the castle done by an archaeologist called Marcus Casey. And Marcus done the first very rudimentary study of the castle and drew the plan of it and said it was a 16th century castle. From then, that was 1992. We went on. The 90s passed by, and my father was still farming in the area. And then coming on to 2006, myself and Maura sat down, and I said, "You know something, Maura, we should do some type of a study on the castle." So we decided to set up a group in the area because we felt that it would gain more traction if it was a community group rather than just an individual. And just on touching on that, you see, it was a kind of a blessing and a curse in the same breath of being involved and owner of this castle, because firstly you were responsible for the people that came up to it, whether directly or indirectly. You were responsible as an individual owner for the upkeep of the castle, which there was nothing to help you with it. This castle was described as a ruin, and a ruin has to be maintained as a ruin. So a ruin can be one stone just on top of another, or it can be a pretty much intact castle. But the state didn't want to know anything about the castle at the time. My father had been approached at one stage and asked to sign the castle over to the state completely free gratis, and he could rent back the 8 acres of land that was round it, which was already his farm. So you can imagine what he told them to do. So we were very much on our own, very much with no help, very much with no support from the state. But we decided that we would set up this research to see what we could learn about the castle. And the most thing we wanted to learn was 2 questions: was when was it built and who built it? And one would answer the other. So we thought it was a very simple thing. With the help of people like Kieran O'Connor, pointed us in the right direction to people that were in the different facets of research, so geophysical, architectural surveys. All of that started around 2006. And from there, we were very happy with funding that we got from the Heritage Council at the time. And slowly but surely, we started to build up a picture of different aspects of the building that was there. They weren't necessarily connected, the different aspects, but they each added a little piece of the jigsaw that we needed to know more. And I suppose at the end of 10 years of research, we would have amassed quite a bit of knowledge. And we realised very quickly that there was very little knowledge out there about the castle in written form, as in literature or books of that. So then what we decided to do was probably earlier than the 10 years, was to publish all that we had found out.
That's very interesting. It sounds like a real journey of discovery over really your lifetime. You've been interested in it and expanding on that through different networks. But can you give me an idea of what size this castle is? We often have this kind of Irish notion of it being a tower house, but this is not just any tower house. This is some massive thing in Gertrude, and also just a bit of a background to the historical and archaeological story of the castle.
Well, we all have romantic notions of what castles look like, but there's no 2 castles that are the same. And as you say, in Ireland, there's a broad range of different samples of what castles. The most we would see probably would be tower houses, which are very simple 3-4 story towers that were used for habitation purposes by local chieftains, their families, and then that goes from anything back towards the Anglo-Normans, who built huge castellated towers, a number of towers. Moygara is unique in that respect, in that it doesn't fall into any of the samples that we would find in the 26 counties further south of us. And the reason that is, it is a large bawn, or what we will call a courtyard, grass covered courtyard, 50 metres by 50 metres, with an angle bastion tower on each corner. And that's important because that's a feature that sticks out as one of the main features for dating in it. So there was a tower in each of the 4 corners, but along with that, incorporated into the northern wall, there is the remains of an older tower house, which would have been at some stage taken down and reused in the building of the later castle. We knew that we definitely, before we started, had 2 different possibilities of 2 different castles there, but we weren't sure until the research was conducted that we had two different castles. And then we found, even when we drilled down further into it, that things like the gatehouse had been adapted at a later stage to incorporate a second gate on it and a portcullis. So a lot of that was kind of had been known but hadn't been teased out as such. So when we had done our geophysics back in 2006, we found out that the tower house, or the butt of the tower house that's on the northern wall of the castle on the inside, sat in a lovely circular feature that ran both outside the wall and inside the wall. So we realized that there had been an earlier enclosure there on the hill before the tower house. So if we start with the circular feature, then came the tower house, then came the building of the bawn, and then came the building of the gatehouse. And I think that was 5 different phases we had. And then subsequently we found out that we had a 6th phase with while you were there, Sally, I don't think it was the same years, where we found the foundations of another kind of house within the bawn close to the southwest tower. Excavation was a huge step forward for us, because up until 2013 we had been totally immersed in research. As you know, I was mad to know how to be able to talk with historians, with archaeologists. So firstly, I went back myself and done a diploma in archaeology in UIG in Galway. And then from there, I went on to do the degree in archaeology in IT Sligo. Mostly just to be able to understand of what I was looking at and what we were looking at if we ever got to excavation. And while I was in IT Sligo, we agreed that they would send out their students to us, because I remember having, when we were in our first year of excavation, training excavation, being sent out to a very flat, wet field in Tubbercurry with nothing in it, that a proposed motorway was going to be built in at some stage. And I looked around at our students and I said to the college, you need a better place to bring your students than just a flat, wet field, and just give them trowels and let them go. So 2013 was the first year that the students came, yourself and your colleagues. And for me, that was a huge step forward, because one, we were beginning to learn what was underneath the soil around Moygara, and 2, I knew that it would answer a few of the questions that we had posed. And in the subsequent 4 seasons, we eventually established the tower house that was under the northern platform, and subsequently found the later building that was built inside the southwest, or just inside the southwest tower.
It's an amazing project that you've done so far, and it's such a special place for me, where I participated on my first research dig, and probably gave me a false sense of what a dig was like, considering we had such good weather. I haven't been so fortunate in times since, but I know my former classmates would agree the hospitality we received and the generosity of you taking time off work to be with us and sharing your knowledge was absolutely fantastic. So where is the project at now? I certainly have seen photos of you at a cement mixer.
Well, where the project is now is that excavations probably finished in 2017, and then we were wondering, we knew what our next step was. We had been 10 years in existence at that stage, and we kind of redefined what we were about. And I felt that the elephant in the field, if you'll excuse the pun, was staring me in the face, which was the building itself. And it was basically saying, you can research it all you like, but until you actually grasp the nettle of conservation. And that should send most people running to the hills, because conservation in this country is left to professionals who work for the likes of the OPW and very people with very deep pockets. And it's fine to talk about, maybe talking about a tower house or something that you want to concentrate on, but the size of the castle that we had, which was Only one tower still stood to the full height, but it's still 50 meters by 50 meters of walls each, and three other towers, and all round it, inside and outside. But I persevered in that we had to be shovel ready, if you excuse the pun, of something would happen at some stage, and if we were in the right place at the right time, and luckily enough, the government appointed Malcolm Noonan as Heritage Minister, and he set up a funding stream called Community Monuments Fund, and it was a groundbreaker for the likes of communities like us who were ready to take on the task of conservation. Now, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, because where do you start with a castle like that? And the key word was Community Monument Fund is emergency conservation. So literally the part of whatever building you're describing has to be fallen down. And what we done was we said, right, let's start with something like there was an archway left on the gatehouse that was nearly collapsed, and with that we would lose a lot of the gatehouse, and we decided to go for that in the first year. Put our toe in the water and see what it was like, and we were very lucky that we got conservation architects like Blackwood and Associates to come on board. We got stonemasons, stone art, Veronica and Tommy to come on board, and straight away we hit it off that we were, hands-on group that were going to be able to help the team as best we could. No matter what they needed, we were there to help and advise them. And very quickly we realised that this was very doable. The first year I think we were allocated 85,000. That was the maximum grant that year. And of course it was a time as well for the first time grant recipients to be able to prove themselves that they were able to get this type of funding, that they were able to allocate it to proper works. It was overseen by National Monuments. It was overseen by professionals at all levels that were going to do the work to the highest standards. And we were lucky in the first year that we got selected, and then straight away we put in for funding in the second year and were successful again. And then we had got to a stage with the gatehouse, and at one site meeting we had brought a number of specialists down, and I happened to walk over to the southwest tower, and in the intervening months from our last meeting there had been a slight collapse over the main doorway into the tower, and the specialists looked at it and we all agreed that whatever works had to be finished on the gatehouse, that the southwest tower was the new critical point of the project. And we knew that eventually we were going to be moving to the southwest tower, but we didn't realise that we would be moving as quick. And we put our proposal in, and in that year, so we've got 3 years funding so far, and at this stage we have pretty much half of the southwest tower complete and conserved. We would hope that we'd be lucky enough to get another year's funding to finish the southwest tower, or very close to finished. And then we can step back from the project a little bit, take cognizance of what we've done, see where we're going, but we also have to then start discussing how we're going to get the public back in to see this building.
That was something I was just thinking about there when you're mentioning the Southwest Tower. With the conservation, are you intending to refloor that tower, or is it really just to address the immediate danger of it falling down?
Well, you see, we have to. It's an evolving situation all the time of what we can do in a season, what we're licensed to do. It also very much on weather conditions. The way the project is set up is it's a start end to end finish. Start to end finish all in 1 year. So each year has to stand alone. But the problem is, by the time that you're picked, the time that you get all your your license is in place, all your biodiversity checks done, everything else. You're literally looking at September by the time you're starting. Then you're very quickly dealing with things like lime mortar, which is a completely different type of a system to sand and cement. So what happens there is it's fine to work with. It's a beautiful setup to work with while the weather is above 4 or 5 degrees. Once it goes below 4 degrees, fresh mortar does not take well to frost. So by the time October, November comes along, you're having your first frost. You're in trouble straight away. Then that you have to stop works, and that's the time that you'll be looking. Everyone will be looking for you to have your allocation for the year spent. When you do mention the mixer there, this year was the year where I came on board with the stonemasons. They needed somebody that was going to be there on site, that was going to be the labourer for all intents and purposes, and I jumped at the chance of spending time with them and basically learning the trade with them. Yes, I'm the man on the mixer. Yes, I know how to mix lime mortar now. Yes, I know how to get pulleys to get it up to a 3-story building and all that. But the amount of knowledge that you gain from experts like Tommy Maguire, who's our stonemason, and Veronica, who is our other specialist, a lady from the Czech Republic who is one of the best stonemasons I've ever seen work. It's an incredible experience to get to work on the building, but also from my archaeological point of view, it's great to be able to interrogate the building inch by inch as you're up close and personal with each stone and with each little piece of it, and you get chance to check what everything is in the building. Now, there are times when it would scare you how precarious it still is, but we are, working hard on the assumption that we are going to get enough money to be able to finish the Southwest Tower. But we're at the critical phase now where this next year will really make the difference, that it will consolidate the three sides of it, the three most dangerous sides of it. We have one more left, probably inside, where the chimneys all run up inside, have to be rebuilt and conserved in situ. But no, we're confident that we have got the right mix of both ourselves, both the right experts. I'm really looking forward again, hopefully this year, to getting the funding. We're hoping that we've made all the right, approaches.
Yeah, it's so important to have some of those specialists involved in both an important project, but also when you've put so much work into it, you wanna see it brought to fruition. And speaking of things coming to fruition, Kieran O'Connor recently edited a book, and it's an absolutely fascinating book covering all kind of aspects of the research that you've done so far, which is great because it means people who maybe aren't even from Sligo or the area, they can buy it all over the world and learn something more about what's been going on in the research. So have you anything to add on the book?
Well, we're very proud of the book, and there were many, many, many meetings of our group where the second last thing on the agenda was the proposed publication. And every time that I came to the meetings, I would have to say that we were still working on it. The reason it took so long was, obviously, Kieran took on the editing of it, and Kieran is a very busy man in the university in Galway, and Kieran doesn't know how to say no to any decent project that people ask him for, so he's a very busy man. And I knew that if we were going to put all our research together, we were only going to get one chance to do it properly. We had one chance to get the proper editor. We had one chance to get the proper publishers. We got Four Courts Press. We put all the information they had together. Kieran edited it. And finally this year we got the release of the book to the public. It's like anything else. You're waiting for a bus and then four comes along at the one time. So this year we've had success with CMF again. We've had a good Heritage Week with our talk with Grellan Rourke and Kevin Blackwood on the progress of the project. We have had the minister's visit, and then we've had the launch of the book. The book is something to be very proud of, because it is an excellent source of research material in the Harvard referencing alone. So for any future people who are looking for anything to do with history and Sligo history especially, there's some great leads there to where to go and look if you are doing research. And I think there was a huge void in the history of the O'Garas in that part of Sligo that wasn't known. Yes, it was known that there was a lake called after them and possibly a castle, but people couldn't put their finger on it what exactly was the history of it, and it had been overlooked and had just ebbed into the ether over the years. So it was time to put them on the map once and for all, and kind of show the public that there was a clan who had lived in this part of Sligo, who had 3 different castles at one stage, who left a very impressive monument behind them, which has stuck, the test of time. And it's a credit to the builders who did build that, because a far less building would be long gone and have fallen down rather than what we have to work with today. And I'm very proud of the publication, and I would recommend anyone, if they can get their hands on it, to have a read on it. It's a sort of a book as well that you don't have to read from start to finish. You can pick up a chapter on any part of it and read the chapter and leave it down, and you'll have learned something, and then come back to a different chapter and it's about something completely different to do with the building. But it's also a very good it's a very good kind of hand tool for any groups starting off, if they have a monument in their area, to how to kind of do it. And we didn't learn it. We've had plenty of mistakes as well, but we learned from our mistakes, and thankfully never made too many major ones. So yeah.
No, you seem to be on the right road, and it's been many years of culmination and different teams, but a core team nonetheless. PJ, Moygara is a place steeped in history and archaeology, as we've described, but something that I'm very interested in is the folklore that's attached to places. And I see you brought in a little sheet there with you today, describing a story that was written down in the folklore collection, school's folklore collection. But, it's a mysterious place. It's, I'm sure, a bit unsettling at night. Have you heard any stories, and would you like to describe things that might have been written down in the past?
Well, you see, I suppose I come from a generation where folklore and storytelling was part and parcel of being, when I was a child, older people were past masters at passing on the history of areas. The only way they could tell it is in a story. We've all forgotten about what ghost stories are, but ghosts were 2 a penny back in the 70s and 80s when you went into an old person that time, and they'd tell you about the ghosts that were around place. And you see, a place like a castle lends itself to being haunted regardless of whether it is or it isn't. Now, I'm not able to say that I've ever seen anything that I could say was a ghost, but I know that there was plenty of battles around the castle, and in the annals of the 4 masters it is noted that people were killed, and I presume they're still buried around it somewhere. We have in later years then, we have mentions of a hermit nun that decided to set up in it at some stage. I don't know an awful lot about that, but I always, when I'm in the vicinity of the castle and when I'm around it, I think of all the generations of children who would have walked around it, would have worked around it, would have looked at it, would have been in awe of a castle like that, and their imaginations would have been piqued by what they would have seen. As you say, I brought in the little story there today that was recorded by a child of the name Maureen O'Donnell from Moygara. She was a child from the area back in the 1930s when the schools were all asked to every child was to bring back a story from their area, and little Maureen at the time, who went on to become a nun in later life, wrote this little story in for a thing. And there's lots of stories if you ever have a chance to look through the Duca's collection from all areas about things in their area that they saw. But this is a unique story that I brought with me today, just to give you an idea of what people were able to tell stories that time to a child and how much they remembered about it. So the story starts, there once was an old woman called Moygara Castle and her son Sean, who lived in a little hut at the foot of a hill of Foy, upon which Moygara Castle now stands. And we still refer to Moygara Castle standing on the hill of Foy. She was a widow, and she had her eye on another man, and therefore she wanted to get rid of her son. So she went to the great O'Gara and said, "Sir, I am surprised you haven't got a fine castle built for yourself where you could entertain people." "How could I do that, ma'am?" he said. "Ara, wouldn't my son Sean do that?" said Moygara. He sent for Sean and told him he would have to build a castle, and gave him a week in which to do so. Sean went home and told his mother the tale and said, "Mother, make an oatmeal cake for me because I must leave." His mother made the cake and Sean set off. He went as far as Skefany, which is a notable little spot on the road from Mullock Road to Boyle. And there he sat down to light his pipe. An old black goat jumped out from behind the fence and said, "Hello, Sean, where are you going?" Sean told him the story, and then he added, "Sure, I'm not able to build a gap, never mind a castle." "Go home," said the goat, "and go to bed, and when you get up in the morning the castle will be built." Sure enough, when Sean got up in the morning, he saw a fine castle standing on the top of the hill of Foy. When the mother saw that her son had outwitted her, she went to the great O'Gara and said, I'm surprised that a great man like you would not have a lake where you could take your visitors boating, and would add to the beauty of the view from your castle." "And how could I do that, ma'am?" he said. Our Sean would do that for you," said Moygara. He sent for Sean and said, "You will have to make me a lake, and I will give you a week to do so." Sean went and told the tale to his mother. He asked her to make another oatmeal cake, for he surely must go this time. She made the cake, and he set off early in the morning again, and when he came to the resting place, the goat again jumped up from behind him on the fence and said, "Hello, Sean, where are you going this time?" Sean replied related his story and added, "I couldn't make a well, never mind a lake." "Go home," said the goat, "and go to bed, and I'll see that all is done." Next morning, when Sean climbed up to the top of the hill, he saw the lake in the valley below him. When his mother saw that she had been outwitted a second time, she went to the great O'Gara and said, "I am surprised that a great man like you would not have some amusement for the people to make yourself more popular." "And how could I provide amusement?" said O'Gara. "My Sean will do it for you," said Moygara. All right, I'll send for him." And as he did, when Sean arrived, he told him that there would be a fair in Ballahadreen in a few days, and that he wanted him to make fun for the people. "Ah, musha, God help you, sir, I couldn't make fun for a baby, never mind fun for the fair of Ballahadreen," said Sean. "Never mind," said O'Gara. "You have from now until the fair day to think about it." Sean went home and told his mother about it, and asked for his oatmeal cake until he would leave forever. So he set out in the morning and came to the halting place, and there again was the goat waiting for him. He asked Sean for his smoke and asked him what he had on the road so early in the morning. Sean told him his trouble. The goat told him to go into the wood nearby and cut the best ash plant that was in it. Sean cut the ash plant and showed it to the goat and asked him, would it do? "Fine," said the goat. And they stayed at Skefany Bush until daybreak, and then they went to Sean's home and found that the woman had married the man. The goat made an awful puck to the door and drove it in. The goat made a drive at the man and the woman and landed one on each horn. He told Sean to sit up behind him, and they set off for the fair in Ballahadreen. After they left Foy, they met O'Gara. Bedad, Sean, you will make fun for the fair of Ballahadreen. Sean drew his ash plant and let the goat have it and said, Giddy up, Billy. They never stopped until they reached the town of Ballahadreen, and this is when the fun started. The cattle were deserted by their owners, who all flocked after Sean, and he's turned out, and as O'Gara sat on his castle, he heard the laughing and cheering 5 miles away. In the evening, Sean threw off his riders and let them walk home, while he sped home on his goat. The old woman had enough of fun and entertainment and never asked O'Gara to set any task to Sean again. And then it's finally just says Moygara Castle is in the townland of Moygara in the parish of Kilfree in County Sligo. Skifany Bush is on the side of the road about 5 miles from Boyle. It is in the townland of Mahana. So now that's just a little clip of folklore from almost 100 years ago, and how children were kind of taught history and of what they saw around them.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and actually both of my grandmothers contributed to the school's folklore collection. They were both in school in Sligo at that time, so I might bring that up in a future day, but that's some story. And does the bush still exist?
I know where, yes, the bush still exists, yeah.
That's mad, isn't it? And it's 100 years doesn't sound like a long time,
No.
but it really did mean a big difference. We're recording this on an internet basis, but these people were passing stories, oral tradition stories, which are something we don't want to lose.
Well, I also remember that, you see, just across the road from the castle is a court tomb, which is of megalithic dating, and Neolithic, should I say, and the people of the area knew that there was something special about the court tomb. But what they done was they realised that it was so close to the castle, they loved to round off history to make it suit their own say, so that the chieftain of the castle was buried in this tomb, you see, so it was never to be touched. So that's how two different eras in history, 2 fields apart, you know, were seen by the local people, because the very same as that story, the only thing they had was their imaginations, and it was the only way that you could entertain children at that time. You know, radio had barely been invented, never mind television, so their imagination was the greatest thing that they had. And storytelling, then, if you were a storyteller, you were never short of anything, because you would always be looked after by people who loved your stories.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you were at Moygara today, would you hear laughing from Ballahadreen?
Now I don't know about that, and you see, but even in the story there, that there's so much of something like a fair being mixed in, which is a very later, you know, kind of a gathering. But who's to say how old fairs are? But you see, this is the thing, they never worried about different areas. Kids didn't know the difference. So if it made sense to a child, that's all that mattered, you see, and it entertained them for a short time. So storytelling was everything.
And is there still goats up around Moygara?
I'm sure there is, yeah. There's people that still keep goats, but there's definitely sheep anyways.
Plenty of sheep.
Yeah.
PJ, before I let you go, there's such a depth to Moygara, from archaeology, history, conservation, folklore, and this community spirit around it. You know, what is your hopes for the future of Moygara, and is there any idea on when people might be able to come and to visit it, as whether it's a tourist attraction or even just a heritage stop on their itinerary?
Yeah, well, we obviously are still in the throes of conservation, but we do realise that the public have to be readmitted back into the castle at some stage. We would like to hope that by the end of 2025 we will be at a stage where we'll have a staged opening of it, parts of it. At that stage we'll have completed 5 years of conservation works. We are already looking at doing an access and interpretation study on the castle and the grounds around it to see what is the best way to let the public back in. Obviously, once we lifted the lid on the Pandora's box, which is health and safety, the public have to be kept at a distance until such time as the building is deemed to be safe. And when that is achieved, then we will be letting the public back in, and don't worry, we'll be letting everybody know. But we need to do it properly, so we need to figure out how do we do it without damaging any of the archaeological infrastructure that's around it, anything to do with the building itself, and how is it done and managed without it being probably a managed site. It'll be a site that's open to the public at certain times, but at certain times it won't be. We've lots of plans, but at the moment we're still in the middle of it being a building site, so it is still closed to the public until further notice.
Well, we very much look forward to the day that we are able to go back and visit it safely, and to have interpretation, and to disseminate all that's been done to the public that are eager to visit. And I know many people who will be interested by this podcast and others, but as PJ says, until it's officially open again, and we'll let you know when that happens, you can't visit up close.
Well, what I'd say is, if we try and keep people up to date, we have a group page on Facebook that we keep adding pictures to of the progress. I can't wait for people to come back in and enjoy it and see the work that has been achieved, see what the building is going to look like, and to be able to see it up close and what it would have looked like 400 years ago when it was built. But we, as I say, we're still in the thick of it, but if you want to keep up to date with us, follow or add yourself on our group page, and we will be delighted. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff on that going back for the last couple of years, lots of photographs, lots of descriptions of what we're doing. But at the moment, it is still very much a building site.
And just for those people who might want to join that group, it's called the Moygara Castle Research and Conservation Project. And I'm sure you'll be admitted to that group if you wish. And it's a great resource to keep an eye on what's going on. And I enjoy seeing from afar what's going on. And I think it's fantastic, the work that you've done. So, PJ, I'm so grateful to know you and to have played a very, very small part in the Moygara story today, and being able to do that was brilliant. And I wish you and the whole team the very best with the project, and look forward to getting back up to seeing it when it's open again. So thank you very much.
Sally, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to both my sister Kate, who is an integral part of project managing the site up there at the moment and deals a lot with the contractors, and our group in general, who are there at all times to help us and facilitate us to get the project over the line, each year.
Absolutely, and Sligo is no better place for community spirit, and we want to see that continue. And brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.